All right, well, thank you all for sitting down with me. A little recap, we did an interview with the other slate that reached out, and then after that came out, Jim reached out to me and wanted to, as I'd offered, to have the same opportunity. So I'm glad you all did that, especially with school boards. I think it's so important to know who the people are that are running and what the issues are that are important, and what you want to do if you continue to be there or, are elected. So let's just start by, Jim, we'll start with you and tell us a little bit about yourself, a little background, and maybe why you're running.
Okay. My name is Jim Martin. I'm currently the board president of the Summit Hills School Board. I'm also the representative for District 843 Special Education Co-op, which is all of the feeder schools and Lincoln Way 210. I'm the president of that board also. I've been a district resident now for over 20 years. And I've been really involved with the district a lot over time. When I started building my house in the district with my wife, I got the job as assistant principal of the junior high in Summit Hill. So I've been an assistant principal. Later on, I left for a principalship, came back. I was the assistant superintendent for a while. I'm now retired. The first time I decided to run for the board, it was because there was an election. There were 4 seats up and only 2 candidates ran.
Wow.
And that I just could not, that in good conscience, I couldn't do that. So I've been on the board now for 8 years. I'm trying to run for my 3rd term. And just been on the board trying to improve things. We had some real needs that came up. I was on the board prior to COVID, and we recognized that we were getting to a point where some changes were going to have to be made within the district. And that's why I've stuck around. And we, as a group, have made some major changes in the district, and for the better, for sure, for our long-term solvency and just to improve instruction. And we have more to do. So
that's looking forward to hearing more about that. Mm-hmm. Did you tell where you were principal? You said you left to be principal.
Oh, I was principal at a few places.
Okay.
It's in administration. That's what you have to do. I was a principal in Burbank, out in Oswego, at Plank Junior High School. So I've been around.
Great.
And before that, I was a teacher for 20 years and taught special education in an alternative high school.
Very good. Stephanie, how about you? You're a current board member as well, right?
Yeah, so this is my 1st term. So I've been on the board for the past 4 years. I've been a resident of Frankfort for the past 10 years. I have a son who is 7 years old in 1st grade and a daughter who is 9 in 4th grade. So my children go to the district. They'll be in the district for the foreseeable future. And I'm an educator myself. I'm a high school English teacher at Buffalo Grove High School. And the reason I initially got involved was because I'm at the point of my career. I'm at the halfway point of my career, and I really wanted to do more. I wasn't interested in going into administration myself, but wanted to be able to give back to my community. And so that's why I initially ran. Why I'm running again is because although we had to make the difficult decision to consolidate our district, I believe that it was the right decision. I stand by that decision, and it has really set us on a positive path. We have been able to keep our class sizes low. We're the lowest class sizes in all of the feeder districts that lead into Lincoln Way, despite the consolidation. We have the highest teacher retention rate of all of the feeder districts going into Lincoln Way. And we have the highest financial rating that you can possibly have. Our test scores are the highest that they've been in 10 years. So, I really think that we are on a positive path. And I know that some people have felt like, their voices haven't been heard and things like that. And that's why I've really spent the past 4 years initiating some new projects and things for our district. So we have a new Parent Guardian Academy. We have a community outreach committee that we didn't have before. We have a student experience committees at every single school. One of the ideas that I also brought was student board members. So we now have 2 8th graders who sit at the table with us and engage in conversations. So I'm really proud of the work that I've done. I've worked really, really hard, and I want to continue that work, and so that's why I'm here.
That's great. Katie?
Katie Campbell, 15-year resident of the community here, 161. And this is my first term. I ran 2 years prior to my term and just missed making the board. At that point, that's how I met Jim, and I also met Joy. And Joy Murphy, who sits on the board now, is one of the reasons that I really kind of got pulled into this. There was some stuff going on with no zero grading policies, and it's as a teacher and an administrator and a parent that really kind of opened my eyes, and I went in, and then I was kind of looked at the curriculum, and I looked at the grading system, and I looked at the climate and culture that you just started to kind of observe by becoming more involved and watching meetings. And Joy reached out, and we did some talking, and she pushed me towards running, and I definitely came in this 4 years with some pretty hard and fast goals of test scores, acknowledging that there was a decline and working to improve those. Just acknowledging, getting the board to acknowledge that there was a decline in test scores, and that we don't live in that kind of district. We can do better. Our kids, our teachers, I knew that there was more out there. Looking at some of the dated curriculums and saying we need to revamp. We need to move forward. I was 11 years a district administrator in 228 for the PE Health and Driver Ed. I lived in the curriculum world for 11 years. And while they were doing some good things, there was some room for improvement. I'm very proud of the work we've done. I have 2 children that have gone through the system, and didn't want no zero for them. I wanted them to be challenged and not just be handed a grade for not doing anything.
Can you explain that a little bit? With no
so
zero
we
means?
don't really have that policy anymore. That was one of the first things to go when we walked in, and that wasn't just because of me. It's because collectively that's how we felt as a board. And so no zero is basically if a student doesn't do something, the lowest grade they can get is 50%. And in the education world, there's a lot of debate as to whether or not with a 0 versus an F. And that I understand. And that is something that I do feel is a valid complaint.
Okay.
But to just say no zero. And it was a hybrid of what actually really needed to exist. And when you really looked at, because I asked at that point before I was on the board, what's our failure data? And it really wasn't a problem. So then why are we enabling kids that don't need to be, coached along? In my opinion, that was not something that our district needed to do, and it became a crutch. My own kids use it as a crutch. It's not gonna. It doesn't really count for that much, so I'm not gonna do it. And this is like in the 3rd, 4th grade, and that's alarming. But I do have
a scary lesson to teach kids, right?
It is.
Yeah.
It is. But there is that debate, and I kind of sit in a little different spot than I did 6 years ago. Evolution is real. I do work with my own students. Zeros have a big impact on your grades, so let's work to get those out of there. And just getting, but they're going to have to do the work to get it.
Yeah.
And you hold them accountable for that. Same thing. It's the same thing with my own kids and the kids that I teach. I'm a PE teacher, health teacher at Oak Forest High School. I work in a behavior program over there that works with kids who are struggling, and who need a little extra help and a little extra just TLC. And that's one of the highlights of my day is working with those kids. I coach my own kids. I've coached a ton of the kids in the neighborhood, and that's our lives, my husband and I. Ellie is in 8th grade at Summit Hill, and Macy's a freshman at Lincoln Way East, and our lives are very busy. But this is the rewarding part. Seeing the outcomes that we've gotten over the 4 years we've been there, just through recognition and a maybe just, hey, we recognize that this is this. let's move in this direction. Okay, and the teachers embrace it and the students embrace it, and my gosh, look where we're at. You know, I'm proud of it.
Good.
Proud of the work we've done.
All right, Cicely?
All right, my name is Cicely Gant. This is my first time running for office. My husband and I have lived in the district for 15 years. We have 3 adult children whom all have went through the district. Aubrey Hills, Hilda Walker, Summit, Lincoln Way North, and they all graduated from Lincoln Way East. I taught school for 7 years. I was a 4th grade teacher for 5 years and a literacy coach for 2. However, the best of my skills come from owning and operating a childcare center for the past 20 years. My why. My why is because I really felt like I wanted to be involved. You know, with the temperature of the climate, whatever you want to call it, or what's going on right now nationally, it forces you to think about, you know, like, what's really going on in my backyard locally. You know, so I felt like I really wanted to be involved. I know that in our community right now, there's a divide, you know, with the decisions that have been made. However, with me being in business and having challenges, I know how to work towards solutions. You know, also, I want to be that bridge. I want to be the bridge in bringing, you know, the parents, the students, the teachers, the board members together, you know, in the community. I want to be that bridge. Also, with, you know, the diverse, you know, population that is moving to District 161, I noticed a huge underrepresentation. And I feel as though when people feel as though they are represented, they're more likely and willing to participate. So I think that, you know, in leadership, we need to make sure that our leadership reflects the community.
So, you being the only non-current board member, I'd like to get your take on, obviously the school closing issue is the biggest, maybe one of the biggest issues. As, you know, a community member and not a current board member, I'd like to hear your take on kind of what happened and how you thought it was handled by your running mates here or the rest of the board.
Well, I feel as though it was handled in the proper manner. I know that there was transparency there. I know that everything was followed as it should be, you know, with the meetings, you know, notifying the, you know, newspapers and things like that. I felt as though it was handled in the correct way, you know, and I understood why, you know, the decision was made in that. I understand a lot of the times when we have to make decisions and tough decisions, not everybody is going to like it, you know, irregardless of the reasons, you know, because, you know, I don't want to close and that's just that, you know, but sometimes we have to make, you know, these hard decisions. But I do agree with, you know, as to the reasons why, you know, the school had to be closed. I do agree with that. And I do believe that it was handled in the proper way.
So maybe one of you could talk a little bit about that, maybe talk about the process that happened for not everybody might be as familiar with what was going on.
If I could just step in and I won't say it all. You guys can, you know, jump into. To put things kind of in perspective, we've, over the course of about 10 years, our student population has declined by over 1,300 students, which is a lot. It's a third of the students that we had attending our district. Mokena 159 has 3 school buildings. 157C, Frankfort, has 3 school buildings. We had 7.
Wow.
We were ending up just spending money on bricks and mortar instead of spending money on students. And that needed to end. To give you an idea about how the 2 buildings that we closed, the population of those buildings, Frankfort Square School, if it were still in operation this year, you could fit every student that attended that school on 2 school buses.
Wow.
To me, that's a great visual.
Yeah.
For a school that had over 400 students in it, to have under 150 students in it doesn't make any sense. We were spending more than $6,000 extra per student to educate those students in the small buildings. just to maintain the buildings. Lights, heating, all of those kind of things. In the other buildings, like Indian Trail or Dr. Julian Rogas School, the class sizes were much larger because they had to be. Because of the people that were living there. There was no way to adjust boundaries or anything like that to really bring about that cost or bring those costs down. So that is really the driving factor behind it. Is we believe that taxpayers want their money spent on educating students.
Absolutely.
Not on maintaining buildings. The 2 buildings that we closed are over 60 years old. They had significant maintenance issues that were going to continue to come about. It didn't make any sense to keep those buildings going and not spend the money on students.
So far already this year, we've saved $423,000 just on operations costs alone for those 2 buildings. And according to like an audit that we had done, over the next 10 years, we'll save $6.2 million on repairs that would have needed to be done. And that doesn't even include the roof repairs. Another kind of analogy or another figure to look at is this year we will have about 303 graduating 8th graders, and we only have about 190 kindergartners. So you can see the discrepancy between those 2 numbers and how what we have coming in and versus what we have going out is significantly different. And although there are some new townhouses and some things that are being built and people are seeing children in their neighborhoods, there is no way to make up for 1,300 students. It's just such a significant amount of students.
Any idea what happened? I mean, that was kind of the issue with North closing as well, right? Is a lack of population growth that was expected there.
But you want to go? Go.
Yeah, I will. So we moved in right as, I think North maybe had just opened. That's why we bought our house, because it was like this brand new.
Same.
And my parents lived out in New Lenox where, and the recession had just, the big crash had hit, and my husband and I had just bought our house at the height of the market, by the way. And so, we sold at the low point. But the foundation was done at West, but nothing else. So they kind of opened those schools, and that growth wasn't there because of the housing market crash. I forgot where I was going with that. What was your? I just wanted. So when a lot of people in our neighborhood have a lot of hard feelings about North and should.
Sure.
And to try to compare those 2 is just something that you have to try to avoid, because where one was a brand new multi-million-dollar facility, that there was a lot of controversy as to whether or not they needed 2 new high schools. There was a lot, and that was before I moved in there. To come to the point where we have lost this population of kids. The birth rate nationwide is down. We are not going to be the last school district closing schools. But I think, when Jim says we had 7 buildings versus 3 in some of the neighboring districts, and just those numbers are not there anymore. And to be able to not only put it into students, but programs. Students and programs for students. And we do have a diverse population. We have a growing EL population. And we need to address all the needs of those kids. And the one other thing I'll say before, I kind of let you guys chime in on this, or Cicely as well, is one number that strikes me is that we would have had 28 first graders at Arbery Hills this year. So you either run one class with 28 kids in it, which we would never do. That's too many first graders. Or you now have to run 2 classes at 14. So it just financially makes more sense to put your kids, where you can spread out those numbers a little bit. And now that was one thing that was one game changer. Like, I was not going to agree to closing schools if our class sizes were going to go up. I would have never agreed to closing schools if our class sizes would have gone up, if there wasn't space for them.
And that was the number 1 concern of the community.
And if we were going to lose teachers. I held hard and fast on that. There were certain must-haves, and it wasn't a decision that I went into lightly, because there are a lot of emotions involved. But I had to make sure that if it was going to be done, it was going to be done right.
My husband was actually a teacher at Lincoln Way North. He opened the school and closed the school. He's now
wow.
a teacher at Lincoln Way East. And we moved into the community too because we thought our kids would eventually go to Lincoln Way North. So certainly that was a thought in my mind as we made these decisions, and absolutely did not want to make this decision knowing all of that history and the pain that our community has already gone through unless it was absolutely the right decision. So as hard as it was, as challenging as it was the right decision. And if for some reason we do get a boom of growth, our district has the capacity, even with these 2 less schools, of 4,000 students. Right now, we're only serving a little bit more than 2,000. So there is room to grow and fluctuate and move, and that obviously was a consideration in this thought process as well. We don't need the full capacity of 4,000, but we can serve that amount of students should we need to.
And we won't get the same spurt of growth that we had before, because when those subdivisions were being built, they were built as, family homes with people that had children. People that moved in, all moved in within a couple years of each other. They all had kids. Well, those kids have now grown.
And people are staying.
And people are staying. They're not, with the way the housing market is, I personally refinanced my house during the pandemic, and I can't get that kind of rate anywhere else. So people aren't moving out. Their kids have matriculated through the schools already. And it's not a problem that is unique to us. The same is true with other communities that faced explosive growth.
So talk about the process. First of all, how it comes along and you start to realize we're going to have to close these schools. And obviously it was a long process, but an idea of what happens from you realize till the doors are closed.
Well, first, I just want to say the first that I heard the school board talk about closing schools was February before during the first campaign I ran. I was sitting at the planning thing. There was a big talk about we've got a lot of capacity in these schools. We're going to have to start thinking about addressing that. At the February planning meeting, it was probably 2018?
2018. Yeah.
So that's the first I started hearing of it.
So we were facing those numbers that we were going to start to go into deficit spending at that point. The only thing that changed that was COVID. Not because we weren't in schools, but because of COVID money that came in from the federal government. ESSER. ESSER funds came in, was well over $1 million. It allowed that bridge to happen, and now those ESSER funds are gone. And we're in the same position that we were in. So we were facing, at the end of a school year, we were either going to have to start to increase class sizes by cutting teachers, because that's really where most of the district funds go to, is to pay salaries. So, and we didn't want to do that. We pride ourselves on the small class sizes because we think that that's the best impact for student education. So we knew that that was going to happen. And once we were through with the COVID piece, we were again facing that shortfall. Every year our district bills can go up about $1 million when you consider heating, cooling, building maintenance, salaries, all of those kind of things. That wasn't in our budget. So we were faced with the idea of you're either going to reduce your overhead. You can either do that through staff and increase class sizes, or get rid of your excess capacity. And that's where we all basically came down to, is that by paying to keep those buildings open, it was a never-ending issue. And we were going to spend down our cash reserves. And that ends up being a double-edged sword. Because if you spend down your cash reserves, right now we have our money invested. It's approximately $8 million by the time you get to the end of the year before we get our new tax receipts. That $8 million we get interest on, which also helps support our budget for our taxpayers. So if you start spending down your cash reserves, now you're also losing your interest income, which makes you spend down your cash reserves even faster. So it's a very quick road to being in a bad financial position, which we were in. For 2 years prior to us closing the schools, our auditors, what's the name of it? I can't remember what that rating is.
The financial recognition?
Yeah, financial recognition. We were not in
financial recognition.
Right.
Yes.
I can't remember what the term is, but anyway, we were in that term saying you have financial problems, and that is published by the state. If you don't take care of it as a board, the state will come in and take you over,
Wow.
and they'll take care of it.
And
So
that's essentially what happened with Lincoln Way.
right, that's what prompted, when they finally uncovered all of the issues at North. So by doing that, we knew that we had issues. We closed the schools. Now we're in financial recognition. As a matter of fact, we had a perfect score on our financial recognition after doing this, because now we're in a fiscally sound state, and that makes a huge difference. Now we get, if we do ever have to take out loans, we could get great rates on it and that. But we believe, by what we've done, we're not going to have to raise taxes at all. We're going to be able to live within our means.
And do you think there's anything that the board could have done handled it differently, or improved anything looking back now? Communication was obviously criticism that came up, or the openness. Anything you'd want to improve looking
because
back?
when I first heard about the school closing, of course, as being a resident of 15 years, immediately my mind went to Lincoln Way North. I'm like, okay, here we go again.
Sure.
You know what I mean? But I think that as a resident, as a member of the community, you have to seek out, like, what's going on, and just like Jim was saying, operating budgets are big. They're big, and the different responsibilities that you have, within the budgets, and once you sit down and you understand the operating budget and you understand the reasons behind why things were done, then you have a better understanding as to why these hard decisions have to be made. And that's exactly kind of what I did, because at first, quite naturally, I was upset about it. Sure. Because, I'm thinking we're going to go through another Lincoln Way North type of situation. But when I kind of put myself out there, did my own research, then I understood why, we, had to do and make the decisions that was done.
And if I could just speak to communication for a bit. We had a brand new set of board members that came on the school board, and that was April of the year that we were doing the study to close the schools. I put all three of those, I put those two board members and Mrs. Burke on that committee to study this, because I wanted them to be able to access the information that we had in order to go about this. We had 7 different open meetings for the public comments were allowed. We had those from September all the way to December. Before we even had our first meeting, those 3 board members that I put on that committee came out on Facebook publicly and said, there is no way we're ever going to close schools. They'd been on the board for 3 months. They had no information whatsoever to base that decision on. So that left us 4 in that type of position to actually look at the data. We had, in those 7 meetings, as I said, there were public meetings, we posted different scenarios of closing the schools. We could have actually, numbers said we could have closed 3 schools, but that was too far for us to go. We didn't want to do something like that.
The numbers didn't scream that for me.
Yeah, but I mean, it was presented in that way, why we were going in this direction. It was brought up about Mary Drew School. Well, Mary Drew School, we still over $9 million on school bonds for it. You can't sell, it's like if you're upside down on your car. If you try and sell that property off and you don't sell it for the cost of what you still owe, you still have to come up with that money. So Mary Drew was out of the question anyway. And it's our newest building. So we went through that entire process. Mr. Oliphant at one point even said he didn't even start paying attention until October. Well, this process had been in process for a long time. And it's really an issue to try and get the community informed. Nowadays, there's no more local newspapers. We could have used something like that would have been delivered to all the homes. Over 70% of our residents don't even have students in school. They just send money, not kids, to school. And there are over 17,000 households in the district. How do you communicate to all of those people when they all use so many diverse types of ways to communicate? It's a true issue. We did everything that we could. We also had a blog that the superintendent maintained throughout this entire process, where any resident or anyone in the district could have written in a question, and it would have been answered, and it would have been answered publicly.
And then published on the website.
Yeah, all of it published on the website.
And are your meetings public as well?
Yes.
They're on the.
They're filmed.
public.
Yes, they're
In real time.
right. And the requirement by law is that you have to post the agenda 48 hours in advance. We actually post our agenda the Friday before a Wednesday meeting. So we even go above and beyond that particular requirement to give people even more time to look at the agenda items and review them. I will say though, I think that we followed all the rules and we did the best we could and we communicated everything we could in every way possible. There's obviously always a lot of chatter on Facebook and social media and things like that. But there was, ample opportunity to reach out to board members, to reach out to the superintendent, to come and give public comments. And I think there's sort of this notion that we didn't listen to the community. And we listened. I heard every public comment. I responded to emails. I engaged with the community. I heard what they had to say. And unfortunately, I realized that this was a decision that had to be made. And it didn't mean that I didn't hear them or I didn't care about what they had to say to us. It's just that this tough decision had to be made. It could have been the easy thing to do would have been to just say, no, we're not doing this. It'll upset people. And I couldn't, with my integrity and my conscience, do that. I have to be able to lay my head on my pillow at night and do what I took an oath to do, which is to take care of our taxpayer money, take care of our students.
All of our students.
Yes, all of our students. And I will say too that, but I did hear those cries for more communication, we want more opportunities to have our voices heard. And I really took that seriously. And so that is why, I really wanted to get that community outreach committee going because it didn't exist. I was still a fairly new board member and that committee didn't even exist anymore.
Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So that committee, I co-chair that actually with Amy Burke. And so what we did was we really wanted representatives from every single school and taxpayer representation. So we put a call out to the community and had accepted applications. And then we looked through those applications, her and I, and we got two representatives from every school, parents, and then 2 taxpayers as well. And then we also have alternates for all of those roles as well. We tried to really get representation from all different neighborhoods and all different professions. It was a lot of teachers because teachers like to do that kind of stuff. But then we went through a selection process, chose people, and we've been running this committee for the past school year. So we've met 3 times so far, and those conversations have been excellent. Some of the ideas that we've had from those meetings, we've been able to institute immediately. So it's been a really great avenue for our community, and I agree that that's something that the community deserved to have, and I wanted to make sure that we put that forth. We also have student experience committees at every school now as well, which was another idea that I brought forth, so that parents at that particular school can meet with administrators and teachers and other parents and talk specifically about that school and some improvements that they can make. And I attended one of those recently, and same thing. There were a number of excellent ideas from parents and community members instituted almost immediately by the teachers and administration. So those have been really great avenues for us to, have more voice and build trust and communicate with other members of the community. And our student board members, like I said, have been excellent because they're who we serve, our students. So we should definitely be listening to them as well and sort of their thoughts. And Audrey and Kimura are their names, and they've been excellent. They've given us such great insights and ideas and had such great conversations that really made us think.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
I don't want to spend the whole time talking about the school closing. So is there anything else any of you want to say in regards?
So just to kind of piggyback off of what they said about looking at every piece of information and knowing, and this was the conversation that I had with the Patrick Oliphants and some of the others that are that have reached out to me that I spoke to during that time, and that who I listened to, and I heard, and looking at all the information, but still having to make a decision that was going to disappoint people was probably one of the hardest things to do.
Oh yeah.
And not being able to please everybody is part of the job. I mean, that's part of life. Is that everybody's not going to agree with what you have to do, and to say to those people, look, I hear you, I understand what you're saying, but having to consider all the facets that fall into it. And really, for me, it was just the general decline in population and how that inequity of spending on the kids in the different buildings.
And I will say too, like,
Because how do you make that right? How do you make that right? How are you serving all the kids in the community if somebody's child or 150 kids get to walk to school? Because that was a complaint. Well, my kid gets to walk. My kid doesn't, and never has been able to, because Bogus was always their home school. So how do you make it fair for everybody? And I really think that when you're serving a community, you have to look at everybody and not cater to a one or two pockets of people.
and I want to say too, like, I certainly hold space for the feelings and the disappointment and the sadness that came with those school closures. That's the part that is not fun for me, you know? And so that's the part that is hard. And, you know, my family experienced the closing of Lincoln Way North, like I said earlier, and we hold space for those feelings, and it's not that we're cold-hearted and we don't care about their children, but we have a job and a role to do, and as Katie mentioned and as Jim mentioned, we have to think about all of our students, and that's what we tried to do.
And one thing that I just want to say, just like Katie said, sometimes you just have to make hard decisions. But when you look at the overall and everything that has taken place, they did their job, because their job was to make the best decision for the teachers and the children. No one lost their job. Class sizes are still small. So the best interest was for those whom they serve. It's, you know, even though they still have to close the school and everything, but, you know, the decision that was made was for the betterment of those who they served.
And I stand behind what I told a lot of people was, I think the kids will be okay. If I didn't think the kids would be okay, I wouldn't be doing this. Mm-hmm. I challenge you to go in there and find a kid that's unhappy at the school that they're at. They're thriving, they're loved, they have a great school, they have school spirit, they have great programs. You know, I'm not in the business of damaging kids. I'm in teacher business. Mm-hmm. I'm in the kid business. Mm-hmm. You know, if I thought that this was going to be a disaster, and to be honest with you, potentially it could have been. It was a calculated maneuver, mm-hmm. and you have to weigh the pros and cons. And at the end of the day, you have to make a decision and say, this is the right thing to do for this reason. And it was more than one reason, but if I thought for a minute that something bad was going to happen, I wouldn't have voted for it. Mm-hmm.
And if I could say one more thing, a lot has been made by the other group that is running about the community. Mm-hmm. You know, yeah, did they have a petition with 1,000 signatures? Sure, they did. There are over 17,000 households mm-hmm. in the district, not just voters, mm-hmm. households. There's voters inside of all those. Mm-hmm. It's an oversimplification on their part to say that they represent the entire community, because people that were sitting at home and watching those board meetings when we were having them saw what was going on and the aggressiveness of a lot of those people. And they were like, I'm 100% behind you, but I'm not coming to that meeting mm-hmm. and saying it, because I'm not gonna deal with that kind of anger and flashback against people.
And there were children in those meetings.
Yeah, I mean,
children. that you know.
It's the hardest thing
That was
I've
the
ever
hardest
had to
part,
do.
yes.
I mean, it really is, to be able to stay the course and deal with all of the things that came back. And we made conscious decisions as board members not to respond to that. You know, not to try and go tit for tat back against people in that way, and just try and present facts and try and do them in the open board meeting, not do it on Facebook. None of us put together any Facebook pages or anything like that to fight, to go back and forth with. We're elected officials, and we spoke at those open meetings where everybody could hear us, and everybody would have a chance to respond if they wanted to.
Not in private groups.
And not in private groups, and not.
Which I can't say for the others, yes.
Right. I mean, there was a
That's
lot
a
of that
stark
kind of
contrast.
thing.
That's a stark contrast.
The superintendent, I think, did an excellent job of trying to keep communication going. There's been constant FOIAs, requests of information, which are very limited in scope. If you ask for something for FOIA, it's very limited. And the superintendent has repeatedly asked people in to meet with them. I know he gave Mr. Oliphant his personal cell phone. It's like, if you ask for this FOIA, you're only getting a piece of it. You read it. If you have questions, call. Doesn't happen.
I think too, like the everything that we're talking about today and the numbers that we're sharing and the data, it's all verified by public record. We're not just throwing out numbers and ideas. Everything that we've done, there's been talks that we're not transparent. Everything that we've done has been out in the open, in the public. Everything can be verified by public record. So anything that we're saying, anyone can FOIA it, look on the website, look at a former meeting, watch a former meeting. It's all there. There's been numbers that have been thrown out that are inaccurate. Such as that our preschool only has 40 students, I heard, 70 students, I heard.
60.
There's been all kinds of numbers, and the reality is that we are serving 125 preschoolers. So when they talk about remodeling that for an early childhood center that we are trying to grow and be a premier center for the area, it's not serving 40 students. There's also been claims that our transportation costs have gone up 43% or quadrupled.
Yeah.
That is also inaccurate.
Neutral.
We used to
Well,
use.
I'm sorry. You said neutral. I don't want to brush past it because that was something that we.
Yeah, so let's talk about that.
Yeah, let's talk about.
Let's talk about that. So we originally used Lincoln Way services. They were starting, their pricing was starting to go up. They also didn't have the fleet to be able to serve us any longer, so we made the decision to look elsewhere. We looked elsewhere. We landed with Safeway because they came in, they gave a great presentation. They promised that we were going to have this app that was going to work really well. They promised that they would have turn-by-turn navigation, all of these promises, right? And obviously that did not come to fruition. We are not happy with that service.
And not just us,
Yes,
other districts
other
too.
districts.
Their
and
entire
busing is an issue all over the place. With costs, there's not drivers, the cost of gasoline, all of these things, right? So we will be going out to bid to get a new service provider because we're not happy with them. But in terms of the price, I want to go back to that because Lincoln Way, if we had stayed with Lincoln Way, our costs would have gone up 7% with them just from 2023 to 2024, and then 7.6%, and then another 7% the following year. So another $100,000, another $200,000. So by looking elsewhere, we saved $300,000. Did costs go up a little bit? Yeah, because of inflation, because of gasoline prices, because of drivers, all of that. Yeah, there's going to be rising costs from year to year. But to say that it rose 43% is inaccurate. To say that it quadrupled is inaccurate. Those are not accurate numbers. And again, all of this is public record, and all of it can be seen.
Right.
And I think this thing with Safeway that was the most attractive to me. That's still kind of is good. Is for the what do they call that? The field trips and stuff.
Yeah, we were not able to have field trips before.
No, with Lincoln Way, and nothing against Lincoln Way, they just didn't have the drivers. Yeah. And that is not a slap on them, so please don't take it that way. But they'd go for a field trip to the Shed Aquarium, they'd get there, and about an hour later they had to turn around and come back because they had to start running their routes. Wow. And with Safeway, we were able to use them for a lot of the field trips and events, and even just the sporting events, trying to get to those after school sporting events using Lincoln Way. They had to run all their routes first, and then you would sometimes be sitting there at game time waiting for your bus.
Oh my gosh.
So Safeway was an attractive option for us, and I don't think it was perfect the first year. I don't think we heard the complaints, and rightfully so, that we heard this year. I look at that this year with Safeway and how did our district team handle it, and they handled it really, really to the best of their abilities. It was all hands on deck, keeping Safeway in line.
And who did that fall on? I mean, was that...
Well, it fall on every person,
Every
principal, every administrator, every administrator.
Trying to help.
I mean, there was a unified board coming in angry at that bus company and the situations. I mean, nobody would wish that upon anybody. However, like Steph said, it is not unique. I have kids in my first period class that walk in 20 minutes late every day. You know, and that's a different company.
Yeah, and Safeway was local. I mean, they had their bus barn was in Matson. So we knew it was all, you know, we thought we were going to be getting local people, local drivers, and
we didn't get
that
what
kind
we
of
paid
thing.
for. And,
we did not get what we paid for.
You live and you learn. But I'm not like saying it's not because we should have stuck with Lincoln Way.
And
Yeah, is there anything looking back at that situation and that you think you could have done
on
differently?
paper? And even that first year, it was good.
Yeah.
And Lincoln Way said that if we were going to stay with them that first year, that there were going to be blackout days.
Yep.
That they would not be able to provide transportation, and they'd be rolling blackout days to not just the high school, but all the member districts that were using Lincoln Way transportation.
There's 2 cycles after school. I don't know if you have kids at the high school, but there's 2 cycles after school that run. You either get an A run or a B route. So if you're done with school, sometimes you have to sit and wait for your bus.
They still don't have drivers.
Because they don't have drivers to service their own.
And
that's not, that is a nationwide
COVID brought that. I mean, COVID seemed to really exemplify it, right?
Yeah.
Like it really made it a big issue.
The thing about Safeway too is they were paying their drivers a really good wage, and they were paying their drivers more hours than they were guaranteed.
Wow.
I forget what it was. And, you know, they had some labor issues this year. We fell into that snafu. They had labor issues. It trickled down to us.
And some of these people want to say, or some people want to say that the problems that we experience with Safeway are due to the consolidation, when that has nothing really to do with it. It's that they would have constant sub drivers. They didn't have enough drivers.
The drivers weren't trained.
The drivers weren't trained, right? Like these problems would have happened regardless of the consolidation or not.
And if you go back to costs, when we had the smaller buildings, there were students like to the Arbory Hill School that get bused there because they're students that live on the north side of I-80 go to Arbory Hills. So they were bused. Not everybody can walk to Arbory Hills. They were bused all the time. But those buses maybe had 15, 20 kids on there. Now those buses, when they go to the school, have 50 kids on there. So we didn't have to increase the number of buses. Right. We just had to fill up the empty buses that were already running.
So we still have some flexibility to run some other routes if we had to. We still have guaranteed, if we needed more routes, we'd add more routes.
Right.
At no cost.
And
at the cost we're at, we have that flexibility to add more.
Right.
Buses.
So, I mean, it's the whole idea that transportation was going to be more has been said repeatedly in open session meetings. Repeatedly. And it's just one of those things that certain Facebook page runners continually bring up.
It was a perfect storm.
And it's not true.
It was a perfect storm, with the bus disaster. It was a disaster.
And it was, and that's the problem. When you have a bus companies buy their fleet and hire their drivers in preparation for a school year. Well, if your bus company falls apart during the school year, there's nobody there to pick up that slack.
And we had the option
So
to
we
go,
were stuck,
and drop them and go with a new. But now we're going to have the start of the school year all over again with new drivers. At least some of our routes, a good percentage of our routes were running properly. There were some troublesome routes, and they were really troublesome. I wouldn't wish that upon anybody.
But they had a lot of good drivers.
They do.
And that treated our kids well. And that was a big thing. While we had some problematic things, the people that were performing the service treated our families and our students well.
Let's start, Cecily. Cecily, so we kind of left you out here a little bit, but let's start with you. I want to hear what you all think is the important issues in this election.
Well, I think some important issues with, of course, is financials, and being transparent in that. Not only in just being transparent, but also in understanding why decisions are being made in the transparency. Also, with the budgeting, making sure that the budgets are according to the district needs, and making sure that every dollar is spent in benefiting, the students as well as the teachers. I think that's number one priority, and let's not forget about the taxpayers. We want to make sure that we are utilizing their money effectively. So I think that's very important, because if you can't budget, you can't run anything without a budget, because nothing is for free. So I think that's important.
Katie, how about you?
Well, there's a lot. There's a lot of things I'm excited about. Okay, I'm excited that our test scores are on the move up. That makes me very proud for our teachers and our students, and it's a good thing for the community.
Talk about that curriculum too.
What
we've done.
We have let our teachers, which is what every school district does. Most, I would say most. The teachers sit down, they pilot different curriculums, they go through a process, and then they land on what they want for the students at a grade level in a subject matter, or at a bunch of grade levels. For like 1 through 4, this is going to be our math or reading program. When I came in, we were looking at a curriculum that we just kept renewing. We kept renewing, and our math scores were going down. And you're looking at the neighboring districts and going, why are our math scores going down? There's got to be something in there. There's got to be something to give. We came in, we have new English curriculum, we have new math curriculum, and we have new science curriculum.
Don't forget Action Lab.
Brand new STEM lab.
Brand new STEM lab.
Right.
We are on a cycle, which they always have been on a cycle. That is not anything that has...
Just didn't follow it.
Well, I think they started following it when Paul came in.
Right.
And not to say that it wasn't there, it really wasn't an emphasis on it. And that's kind of the nuts and bolts of what you're doing. I think as a teacher, you get comfortable with certain curriculum, and so it's just easier to say, well, let's just do that again. But when you look at even the resources that you're getting with some of these new curriculum that are out there, it's just amazing what's out there. But I'm excited about that. I'm excited about the property we purchased.
Yeah, DJR.
And I'm not in any rush to do anything with that other than what we need to do at this point.
What is that? Can you explain
so
what
we
that is?
just purchased how many acres?
8.5.
8.5 acres, just
8.8.
north of Rogus. We own right now, it really kind of butts right up to the building almost. There's not much room out there for expansion in that direction. One of the things we heard through the school closures was the buses. There's too many buses there. The parking, the kids playing on the playground. So this pocket of land was kind of the X factor in getting us the right portion of land, so we can kind of plan that out, put some more parking, get the buses out of the front of the building potentially. I'm not speaking for anything in terms of that, but I just think there's a lot of ideas that the community can have a say in to what we want. I mean, there's so much land back there. It's going to be good for the neighborhood. It's going to be good for the community. It's going to be good for the school. And maybe I shouldn't talk about this because this is future stuff.
No, we haven't really done. We're fine.
Yeah, but the community needs to have an input. I looked at Mokena. MIS got a new playground. Play surface, and it was all over their website how these kids are out there, and I think that's awesome. So let's do that. My thing has always been, and I get this thrown back in my face sometimes, state of the art. I travel around, I coach, I travel around a lot to different facilities, and I was up in Lombard at this facility for volleyball that's connected to a school, and it's Park District / school.
Really?
It's this huge field house they threw on there, and on the weekend they have a STEM lab they put in with that. They have turf. They have, and I'm not saying that we're going to do that. But what I'm saying is wow, why not us? Why can't we have that? I'm excited for our district, genuinely excited. We moved into our new spaces. We need to let things settle in. We need to let the dust settle. Change is hard, and it was uncomfortable, and people are still manipulating within their space. One of the example that I use is I teach in a district in 2019, and I'll say this very quickly. We got a new field house, weight room, all this stuff, and we were, however many PE teachers, we were all stacked. We were just close. We were just used to being next to each other all the time and teaching and team teaching and whatever. And we got this new space, and we were kind of like, well, what are we going to do now? Like, I never see you. So it's taken us probably until this year to really settle into that space, move around each other in that space, use each space to the best of, use type of thing. So I'm excited for our district. I'm excited for what is to come. And I don't want any negativity to really hinder that, because this is a new and exciting time. And I'm excited about it.
Stephanie, no pressure.
Sorry. No, I was just going to say, going off of that is because of the financial decisions we've made, we can now do some of those things. We can now enhance what we have. We can make it better. We can improve it. We can bring a new STEM lab to our intermediate school and our junior high and provide those opportunities for our students. So I'm really excited about those things too, and I think it's so great for our district and for the future of our district. What I think our pressing issues are, our teachers have done a phenomenal job, as Katie mentioned. They deserve to have autonomy in their classrooms. They are the experts in their field. We trust their judgment. We trusted their judgment with the curriculum that they piloted several curriculums and ranked them and voted on them and tried things and said, this is the best one.
And presented
to us. And we said, yes, we trust you. We
Almost all of us
we
said
believe
yes.
in you. And the proof is in the pudding, because our test scores have risen, and so they're doing a great job. I get personally offended when I hear people say that we have a failing district, or the future looks bleak and all of these things. I get personally offended, not just as a board member, but for our teachers and our staff, because that simply is not true. Our district is not failing. Our district is thriving. As a parent perspective, my kids are having an amazing experience. Every teacher that they've had, every librarian, every social worker, every psychologist, every person who works at recess and in the cafeteria has been such a great human being in their life. And
the dogs.
And I am a big proponent of public education. Public education is one of the best things that we have. And I want to protect that. I think that our district is wonderful, and I just want us to continue to thrive and continue to serve our students. And certainly there's some things that we can change and some work we can do. I really think as our EL population increases, we can support them a little bit more. I've talked a lot about supporting students who are more in that gifted range. Before, when our schools were more spread out, we didn't have a big enough third grade group or a big enough fourth grade group to really be able to give them some accelerated experiences. So now that we've consolidated, we're able to offer more of that kind of stuff. So those are the things that are really on my mind. And like I said, I'm really proud of the new initiatives and programs that we've brought, and I just want to continue that work.
Great. Jim?
Just to hit a couple of the points that were brought up, the Rogus land acquisition was a huge piece. Because if you drive around and look at any school in any of these communities, what do you see next to the school? It's usually a park. When you look at Rogus, it's not. It's just stuck there on its own. You can't even get to it unless you drive to it. By getting this piece of land, and in conjunction with the park district, we're going to be able to start to flesh that out as a community space. Not only used for the school, but also used for the community. And as soon as we bought it and we said, yeah, we're going to put a sidewalk in and connect, right away people are like, they're going to get rid of buses. They're going to make us whole. Instead of looking at the positives of it, where we're going to put a sidewalk in so people can get to the school and use the space. We have no intention of doing that, closing that. We're going to have options now that we've not had before, and money brings options. Yeah. We are extremely fortunate in that we have the I-80 corridor within our district. That is commercial property that brings money and not students to the district. They're going to put in a new sports dome there. If you look over, a lot of people don't know that we extend across I-80 to 183rd Street. Well, that new gas and wash they put in there, the hotel, those are all additional tax dollars that get to come into the district when those things mature to take the burden off the local taxpayer.
You all get all our tax dollars down LaGrange through Mokena too.
Yes, we do.
Yeah, because we have just enough that way, right?
Yeah.
You're right. That's a good
I mean,
point.
like,
I never thought of that.
It's funny the way our boundaries are. You know,
Yeah.
we're Cook County to the north and to the east, and to the south, it's the bike path, which used to be the railroad. And then if you look at the power lines that run almost north and south, that's where the dividing line
Oh,
is.
really?
For the district.
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
the easiest way to go. Because those were all set down a long time ago, before there was a highway, before the electrical lines and all that stuff was running through. So I am really excited about the fact, for all of the things that they said, in that we're going to have options and we can look at things. We've been waiting to replace the parking lot at Hilda Walker School for 10 years because we didn't have $1 million
It's a big lot.
to replace it. By doing this, now we can replace that. The things that those
either
are
had
great
to-
buildings.
You
that
either
can't
had to
be
choose
run
a
down.
roof or the parking lot. Obviously, you have to choose
Yeah.
the roof.
And it's ridiculous that we chose that, when we and I'd like to just talk about the preschool, the fact that we had this building that housed, people were saying that the building was empty. No, it wasn't empty. One third of the building is our district office, so we have to have that space to run the district. The other half of the building was underutilized, there's no doubt about it, but it's also our newest building. It's newer than the junior high with the remodel that was done. Now we're going to start to grow that program. And that's what we should be doing, is growing that program, because that is the next area of education. If you really want to increase student test scores and student efficacy in class, is you start younger.
And that's, sorry if I can interrupt you for 1 second. That's why we extended the kindergarten day to full day. That was one of the decisions
Right.
that our board made, and that was a decision that we made proactively. And then look and see what happened in the state. Now the state mandates that you have to have full day kindergarten.
Really? Okay.
So we proactively made that choice. We wanted our students to have more, our kindergartners to have more music and more PE and more art, and without that full day extension, they were not getting exposure to all of those different electives. And so, it was stated that there was not a plan for that. There definitely was a plan for that transition. And again, it was a proactive measure, kind of seeing what was happening in the state, knowing that eventually it probably would be mandated across the state, and it was. And, certainly people had some concerns about busing kindergartners with fourth graders. We heard those concerns. We made those decisions to not have them on the same bus. So those were things where we listened to what people's concerns were, and we put those things into action. But to say that there was not a plan in place, again, is an inaccuracy.
Talk about then the relationship between the administration and the board, and then maybe to get into a little bit, as you've talked about, but how the board operates together.
I think we have a great relationship with the administration. I think we do.
Yeah, I mean,
We have thrown a ton of stuff at our administration, more than they'll probably ever have again in their careers. And they've risen to the challenge. Everything that there were a lot of things that people asked, not to have buildings empty in the community, to maintain small class sizes and that. Our administration is what made that happen. We made that mandate on them. This is what we want, and they came and did it. I mean, I can't say anything but good things about them. It's one of the reasons why we extended the superintendent's contract to now. We added a year onto his contract because now he's going to retire. That's going to be the last year. So the board members that are selected, the 4-year board members that are selected in the selection, will be the ones to pick out the new superintendent. And that was the reason why we did that. We structured his contract in alignment with when a teacher retires. We structured it to be in alignment with that same type of contract with them. So we know we have him for 3 years. And we're going to work them to death in the meantime. But let me just say one thing. There a lot was brought up on the other podcast about, the cost. Our superintendent for both of those buildings did not go to a real estate agency to do those sales. We did that in-house.
He brokered it himself.
He brokered it himself. That was $145,000 per building that was saved. He brokered the sale of the land next to Dr. Julian Roga's school, which was being asked. Originally, it was $800,000. They brought the price down to like $480,000. He got it for $325,000. He is more than paid for his salary. And one more thing I want to say about that in his terms of his commitment to the district. When he was hired by the previous board, I was a member of it. I was in the minority at the time. They set his salary to be in line with CPI. Well, CPI that next year was 8%.
Meaning
So
his raises
he
would
was-
be in conjunction with CPI.
Right.
Okay.
So he was due for an 8% raise.
Wow.
He took a 2% raise.
Wow.
And he's taken a 2% raise each year after that. So
He takes
he's left
CPI,
money on the table.
He's left money on the table.
He's left money on the table. So, and finally about that, my final statement of that is if anyone would like to go to the Illinois Association of School Boards, they do studies about superintendent pay for different regions in that. His pay is right in alignment with that. So that stuff that was thrown out there, it's a tough job. It's highly specialized, and you have to pay people for those specialties, But I think we've gotten a tremendous bargain out of it because he and his team have acted in a way that they have more than paid for their salaries.
And that's one thing he tells when he hires a new admin, he says you need to pay for your salary in the first year. Meaning go out and find grants, go out and find money, go out and find savings, whatever you need to do. And that, to me, is a high bar. And that's a lot of pressure. And I asked him at one point, I said, how much grant money have you brought in? And it's in the $20 million range.
Wow.
$20 plus million of savings.
Wow.
In just having the people in the right positions to go out and say, okay, we're going to fund this through this grant money. We're going to ask for this. We haven't gotten all of them. There's been some the COPS grant and stuff that we've not been successful on.
And that's I'm sorry to cut
Go for it.
I'm
Go
just
for
saying
it.
that's important in having a sound
Yes.
budget.
Yes.
Seeking grants.
Other revenue
Yeah.
streams.
And
Grants,
he-
programs.
Sure.
And
helps
the
in
one
that
thing
sound.
he always does within his budget is say, okay, we're going to ask for, and I'm just throwing out random numbers, $1 million for new safety and security within our schools. This is what we need to do to upgrade and make our buildings safer. And we're going to put that into the budget. We're going to apply for this grant. If we get the grant, that money then can be redistributed to other projects. So we have projects, and then we have, wow, these other projects would be great. And at the same time, we're not borrowing money to do that as a district. And in turn, that's a savings that will go to the taxpayers. School finance is complex.
It's very
School
complex.
finance is a very
sure.
finite aspect of accounting that my sister's very high in CPI asked a question, was that school finance? I can't.
Cicely, I'd like to hear,
Sorry.
because I want to get to the idea of how the board is working, but
Yeah.
coming from the outside, attending meetings and that, what's your view of the board and how it works and how well they work together?
Well, my view in the board and working together as board and working with the administration. You have to have relationships. You have to form relationships. I think, getting involved in just the different things that's going on in the schools, them seeing your face more, because the more I see your face, the more, I feel comfortable in talking to you. Yeah. I think that's important in building those relationships, because when you build those relationships, we can have conversation, and even if that conversation is hard, it might be a little less tense because I know you. You're my friend. You're an associate, or whatever you want to. So I think that building those relationships is very important. And that's not only between administration, educators, but also amongst the board members as well. Even with the students. Going to the schools, visiting the schools, seeing what's going on, what's the temperature of things, what events are going on, what projects are you guys working on. I think that's important. It's all about really the relationships.
I was just going to say about our relationship with the administration, I think is really wonderful and great. We, like everyone has kind of said, we've thrown a lot at them. We've said we want a parent guardian academy. We said we want a community outreach committee. We said we want student experience committees. That's all extra hours for our administrators. And they have, there's been very few things that we've said we want that will make communication better or be good for our students that they have ever said no to. And so I think that really shows that their commitment and also their trust in what we're directing them to do and asking them to do, I think is really strong. We certainly don't always agree as a board. For example, when we were deciding on the consolidation, there were some members who wanted to move more to like a grade center model, and there were some of us who did not particularly care for that particular avenue and route, and we were able to have productive conversations on that and decide that that's not the avenue we would go with. But we certainly are able to have those conversations in respectful and productive, healthy ways and work through some of the hard together.
I think it's what you bring to the table. I think if you do your homework, you do your research, you come to the meetings prepared, and then you can have productive conversations about, and there's a give and take. I mean, there wasn't hey, we're going to close schools and we're going to do this and we're going to do that. It was months of conversations of how that was going to look. And it was phone calls saying, answer this for me. How is this going to look again? The same questions over and over again, so that you are solidified with where you need to be to get to that point. And how's it going to play out? And what if this happens? And what if that happens?
So there were some conversations too about how it was originally said we would not make the decision in December. That's not necessarily how it went. It was, we don't know when we're going to make this decision. It could be months, it could be a few months, it could be whenever the board is ready to vote on it. As was stated, there were members that had already made up their mind. So it was kind of known where they stood. And then there were other members who needed more time to process and ask questions and walk the schools and ask the same questions and do some research and talk to constituents and talk to Paul, Dr. McDermott, and over and over and over again. And then when all members were ready to make a decision, when they felt like they had enough information, that's when the decision was made. It's unfortunate that it was right before Christmas. That's not ideal, obviously. We weren't trying to ruin anyone's holiday, but it just so happened that that's how it played out, and that's when people were ready to vote.
I was rather surprised we actually did that vote that time. We put it on the agenda because we were at that point where we had to make the choice.
So you don't want to hold it over people's heads.
Right. I mean, and that
so
was
much emotion.
Right. And that was kind of the thing about it. It's like, okay, let's put it on the agenda and see where we are. And, because we need to provide the administration time to make that transition happen. It just so happens we were all at that point at that time, and then they brought up, we want to vote on it again. We were fine with that. I put that on the agenda. We voted on it again, and everybody was still on the same page. And it's obvious that there is a split in the board at this point. But I would defy you to take a look at any of the board meetings that we have where it's not cordial and productive conversations with each other. And, they vote, the board minority, let's just put it that way, there's more times that we've all vote together than we vote separately. We have some very distinct ideas that are different in some areas, but there's a lot of things that we agree on. And we're always cordial and respectful at the board table with each other. You won't see the same type of attacking types of things.
So one question I'd like all of you to answer before we kind of get into the wrapping up is, every parent, teacher, and many of you are in the schools that understand the concern of safety in schools. So what can you all as board members do or as a board do to make sure and assure parents that when they send their kids to school that they're going to be safe?
This is my favorite topic.
Well, go ahead then.
So it is, and I do a lot of conversations with other superintendents. I do a lot of conversations with security, with police officers, with just all the entities that be like, what is the best laid plan? Have had some own situations in my own school, in my own classroom, that really kind of pushed me, into the direction of this is really a hot topic for me. And what can we do? You can't prevent everything. We all know that. You have to go with data and statistics. I am 100% in favor of anything that's going to deter a bad situation happening, and anything that's going to lead us to a good place if that, God forbid, something bad does happen. I'm all for it. I think we have to be realistic in our costs and how that's going to lay out. I think that eventually we'll see security in our buildings in some way, shape, or form. I think that's where we are all going. I think that's where schools are going. I think that's where families are comfortable. I think there's other things that we can do, and we don't talk a lot about security in open session, because then we just tell everybody what our secrets are. And it, to be honest, there's not a lot of secrets, but there are things that are happening that put things instantaneous, and that's all I'll say.
With the sale of Arbory Hills, we set aside $450,000 to harden our buildings. And those are the things that Katie's talking about. We're not going to tell everybody what those are, but, keeping intruders out of the building is the number one priority. So we, before we paid for anything else, we took that money because we need to make sure our students are safe. It's a different thing when you do those types of activities because it's a one-time cost. The problem whenever you bring security in the building is it's an ongoing cost, a non-educational cost. So you have to balance those things.
So those are the things that we're currently in conversation about. We've had a lot of conversations over the past few months about security or SROs or things like that. We just recently put out a survey to our parents, our 7th and 8th graders. We wanted our student board members thought it was really important for us to get their feedback and see how they're feeling. Personally, I have 2 little kids who go to these schools, so it's of utmost importance that they are as safe as possible. And so those conversations are ongoing, but certainly, making our buildings more secure is something we all support.
That's great.
Yeah, so first and foremost, a child cannot learn if, they're not in a safe environment.
Absolutely.
I know that we're talking about, like the safety with the buildings and everything. I also would like to take it an aspect of the mental state as well.
Good point.
Everybody knows there's a lot of bullying going on. And I know that the schools now have an anti-bullying program, which I think is really, really good. If a kid does not feel safe, if you do not give a child safe spaces, it will be hard for them to learn. So I think that it's important that we provide programs, enrichment programs, give children safe spaces so that they will feel, comfortable and safe and come to school, even on a mental capacity.
Yeah.
And if they're struggling, they know where to go to get the help.
Absolutely.
And that's where the SEL, the social workers and things like that. And that's one thing that a lot of schools have picked up on.
Yes.
I've seen it in my own building where I work, where it's just like another social worker. But I do see it as being effective. Kids know where to go.
Absolutely.
Kids know where to go to get the
Our
help.
They
social
have to
work-
have
yeah.
that. They
our,
have to have
our
that.
social workers have done a phenomenal job. I can tell you at Indian Trail, which is one of our 1 through 4 schools, our social workers have created a program where everybody on Wednesdays at 3 o'clock drops what they're doing and does some kind of social and emotional lesson with the students. From my own perspective as a parent, my kids come home just talking about that and how wonderful it is and how they're using the language that the social worker is giving them to help them work through their own sort of emotions and struggles that they're having. And we're certainly very supportive of that work. And actually, I attended one of our parent guardian academies, which was consequently about bullying. And they talked about how our bullying incidences have really gone down in the past year. And when I asked them about what they say is the reason, or what they think is the reason for that, they say it's because of our social workers and the social emotional learning that they're doing at the younger grades to help them to better navigate conflict with their fellow peers.
That's great.
And the teachers can identify the students that are struggling too. I mean, they learn from the social workers as well. The teachers learn techniques and there's just that protocol put in place.
Yeah.
You know.
Any other important issues that really stick out that you want to address before we wrap up?
Just positivity. Like, try to look at the glass half full.
I just wanted to say one thing that we didn't really mention was what we've done with the proceeds of the sales of those schools. So, Arbery was sold for $1.9 million, which is actually more than the building was assessed for. So, we were really proud of getting and one thing I said when we were having these conversations is, I can in good conscience vote for this consolidation if these buildings will sit empty. To look at Lincoln Way North and drive past Lincoln Way North and see that, it's too painful. And so, Dr. McDermott really assured us that would not be the case. And he followed through with that in less than a calendar year. Wow. So we sold Arbery for $1.9 million. We're in a lease to own agreement with Frankfort Square with the Park District, which is great. That building is being used for our community. Yeah. And so that's been awesome. Frankfort Square also paid for our new playground at Mary Drew. We've used $1 million from these proceeds to pay down bond debt. The district will be completely debt-free by 2027. That will have a direct impact on our taxpayers. Like we said, $450,000 went to hardening the buildings, and some of that money is still available for us to use for other projects and other things. So I just wanted to mention that, a lot of people ask, like, well, where did the money go? Well, that's where the money has gone, and that's where it's going, and, we're using it for very useful things. People talk about the cost of renovating Mary Drew. Certainly that was an investment, but it was an investment that was completely in our budget and did not require any more taxpayer money. Also, when you become debt-free in a school district, what typically happens is you go out and you find more ways to incur debt. Our district has no sort of plan to do that. We don't want to accrue more debt. We want to live in our means. We don't want to raise taxes. We want to be able to function with what we have, and we're on a path to do that.
Yeah, we could have taken $325,000 and made it debt neutral, but instead we took $1 million, so everyone would get some kind of tax relief. Bonds are what they are, costs are what they are, but we made sure everybody was, it's not just that you're reducing the money, it's also what usually every year it goes up a little bit. So it's, for somebody that has a $250,000 house, it'll be about a $75 savings. But that's a savings, not the regular increase that you would get above it too.
Right.
So it's a compounded type of thing, because our taxpayers need some kind of relief, and we hear, that's another thing that we hear from the community at large all the time. We're trying to be responsible stewards with their money and getting the most bang for their buck. And by the improvements that we're making, we're raising the profile of the district, which is only going to help homeowners when they go to sell their homes. We're already past other Lincoln Way feeders in our test scores, and that's not good enough.
Well, and you mentioned the empty buildings. I mean, you think about the effect that those have on property values in an area too, especially in Frankfort Square. Cicely, let's start with you, and just like to hear you guys each share, why voters should vote for you this election and why you're the best candidate.
Okay, so I don't want to say that I'm the best candidate because I'm the newest. However, like I said before, I really just want to be involved. I want to do the very best that I can for this district. Anybody who knows me know that I am a hard worker. I have tenacity that is unmatched. Okay, and I will do everything in advocating for the best for our teachers and for our students. Like I said before, I want to be that bridge. I want to be the bridge that, connects us, as, board members, students, educators, and community. So, vote, and that's about it.
Okay.
This is my life's work. Like, education is my life's work. I put my 31 years. It sounds like a lifetime, and it has been. And I've been in different districts, and I see where I live, and I want the best for that. And that is my promise to the community. I'm very upfront with what my ideas are. I'm very open to hearing other ideas. But at the end of the day, I want what's best for all of the kids in our community and all the taxpayers in our community. And I think we're on that trajectory, and I want to continue and see that through. And I'm on the 2-year term, which is a little bit of a unique scenario, but I'm just excited. Like, I see that in that time that I think I can get the things that I want to do, the projects I still want to be involved in. The continue to rise in test scores, the continue to work with the curriculum, the continue to have a good climate and culture within our building and promote positivity within the neighborhood, in the neighborhoods. That's where I'm at. I mean, that's what I want. We're in a good spot. I'm excited.
Stephanie?
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of my friends and family say, why in the world would you go through this again? And it's a great question because I have been probably called every name in the book. I've been called evil. There was literally a picture of a witch being burned at the stake that was posted in regards to me. And so I have taken it. I've been through it. And the easy thing to do would be to just say, I'm done, and throw my hands up and let it be somebody else's job to do this. But it's too important, and my kids still go here, and I care a lot about our teachers. It was said that we have too many teachers. Well, our class sizes are low because that was intentional. We kept teachers. That was a promise that we made when we did the consolidation, and we have 25 retirements in the next 4 years. And so through that attrition, we'll be able to keep teachers. There's no reason to cut our teachers. And so, as I mentioned earlier, I care deeply about public education. And that's why I'm here. And I promise to continue fighting for the great public schools that we have in the area. And I hope that people can, I'm confident actually that people can sift through the misinformation and what's been put out there and really see what the reality is and the path that our district is on and continue to be on. And I hope that through the work that I've done in the past 4 years that I will earn people's vote once again. So thank you.
Jim?
Been around for the terrible times, and they were terrible times. And I want to be around for the healing, and I want to be around for the progress moving forward. I'm 66 years old. I don't have any students in the district. I do have children that live in the district. Both of my sons bought houses in the Frankfort Square area. I've laid down roots here. This is where I live. I've had a over 20-year experience with the district. It's near and dear to my heart. I've been in education for over 40 years. I'm retired, but I still have the bug. It's the most important work that you can do because you're talking about children and making their experience in school the best it can possibly be. And what better work can there be than that? I really don't care what the adults on the outside have to say about it. That doesn't matter to me. Those things will heal over time. Yes. This too shall pass. But we have a lot of great things that are right on the cusp of being enacted, and I want to be there for it. So I ask people for their votes for that.
I really appreciate you all sitting down. As I said, I think, and especially with our kids and the schools, hearing from the candidates and getting to have a better understanding of who you are, I think makes everybody a better informed voter. So I appreciate you all being willing to do this with me. We have one more. There's another individual that's running independently, so we're going to talk to him as well, so you can look for that interview. But if we have all the candidate interviews on our website, be sure to check those out. Early voting starts March 17th, and election day is April 1st. So be sure to vote, and again, thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.